We're in for a wild night.
Yeah, I'm really excited to jump into this tonight. So tonight's main topic is the lore of Fractured in Alterac, part 1. So Alterac Valley has a lot going on. So we're going to break this up into 2 episodes in order to make sure that we give all parts of the story their due. So today we're going to be talking about the 2 warring factions in Alterac Valley, the Frostwolf Orcs and the Stormpike Dwarves. And next time, we'll talk about Alterac Valley itself and take a look at some of the locations and the legendary minions in the set. That being said, there are 2 legendary minions in this set that don't really fit well lore-wise with the rest of the other legendaries, so those 2 we're going to cover independently. Those 2 are the Paladin legendary Sidon the Scarlet and the Demon Hunter legendary Karia Felsoul. So for those of you who are watching, we'll be talking about Sidon the Scarlet tonight after the main show here on Twitch, and then covering the other one in the near future. So, and then for those of you listening to the audio version of this podcast or watching this on YouTube, those characters will be broken into their own little mini episodes and posted to YouTube for you to check out separately. The easiest way to find that content is just to visit our website again, which is borntobewildhs.com, and we'll have links posted there. Okay, that is enough from me. Let me pass the mic over to Goliath. I'm so excited to hear the story for tonight.
Oh, absolutely. As I always love coming here. I always love telling the stories. And this is one that it's, on one hand, it's very specific towards a certain couple factions right here, but we're also going to touch on filling in a couple of pieces with some of the larger story that it's connected to, because while the factions themselves, we got 2 clans of a race. We got Stormpike clan of the Dwarves and the Frostwolf clan of the Orcs. Their stories are connected very much with that of the rest of their people. We have a lot more that we're going to talk about with the Orcs than the Dwarves. Not that there's any bias here. Obviously, if there were, I would be in favor of the Dwarves. There's no question about that. But it's just a matter of the story material that we've been given to work with. So just a heads up about that. So we are going to start just by talking a little bit about what Alterac Valley is. Right, Nate?
Yeah.
So, just kind of setting the stage here.
Yes.
So, essentially, Alterac Valley is, well, a big snowy valley in the Alterac mountain range, and it is one of the most famous original, what you call a battleground in the game World of Warcraft. Basically, this very large instance player versus player zone where you have a goal largely to get in and conquer the opponent's fortress, but there's a whole lot of complex stuff in it, and we'll be getting a lot more into that in part 2 because there are many of the game mechanics and characters in it that they turned into Hearthstone mechanics and legendary characters, so that's not our focus today. But the important thing to understand is that this is something that was like really, really big throughout WoW's history, kind of like right from the front in the PvP area. And so you got a lot of people who become very invested in supporting either the Stormpikes if you are Alliance, or the Frostwolves if you are the Horde. And today we're going to be talking about how both of those people got there and why they're even fighting in the first place. So we are going to get started by talking about the Frostwolves. And so the Frostwolves, like all orcs, are not native to the world of Azeroth. They originated on another world called Draenor. If you remember anything about way back when we covered the lore of Outland, back in the Ashes to Outland expansion, that's like a whole other world that had its own evolution and it's almost its own different types of magic and the way that races developed and stuff. But the orcs were basically this race that evolved, or kind of almost de-evolved from previous races like ogres into a very savage world that's very fight to survive type of lifestyle that they have to live in, and they form all these different clans. And one of these clans is the Frostwolf clan. And that, if Frostwolf sounds familiar to you guys at all, we have had a couple cards that right from the start of Hearthstone that had Frostwolf in them. We have Frostwolf Grunt, and Frostwolf Warlord. Now, all this time later, you're finally going to get to know what these guys are about. Why do they have the word Frostwolf in them?
And do the Frostwolves really like Silverhand recruits? Because Frostwolf Warlord certainly does.
Not particularly. In fact, there's no such thing as an Orcish paladin in the lore so far. At least, who knows what they'll come up with.
Hey, we got
someday.
a demon one.
That's a very specific story of that. We're not going down that tangent.
Different story for a different day.
Yes. But essentially, so the Frostwolves are, well really the origin behind their name isn't a huge mind puzzle. They got their name because they were able to, as a clan, develop a close bond with Frostwolves, like snowy wolves who live in a snowy area. Now, this isn't Alterac Valley. That's a different snowy area they're going to get to later on in the story. On their homeworld of Draenor, they lived in a place called Frostfire Ridge. So this is basically a mixture of just like huge snowy tundra landscape with tons of volcanoes in it as well. It's a rather inhospitable place, but they managed to get along pretty well. Like I said, orcs are survivors by the very nature. It's the world that they came to be in the first place. And so the Frostwolves are one of the smaller orc clans, really. Only like less than 100 members overall, and that's small compared to some of the others. They're more minor, but they ended up playing pretty major roles in the history of the orcish race because, well, frankly, they are the reason that Drek'Thar is a character in Hearthstone. Yeah, so does anyone remember what Drek'Thar is? He's not an orc. Well, he's a half orc. The other half is ogre. Is a half. So if you remember the card in Mercenaries, he's labeled as half orc. The official name for his race is called a Magni Warrior, and they were actually bred as a slave race by the Ogre Empire, who were very cruel and domineering of the world and loved to enslave orcs. And so they had forced breeding programs, like this is pretty nasty stuff here, where they forced offspring between orcs and ogres, and so that they could get being with the brawn of the ogre, but the smarts of the orc. And then eventually they unleashed them on the clans who lived in Frostfire Ridge, including the Frostwolves, and the leaders of the Frostwolves ended up fighting against them. But then once they realized that, oh, these guys don't actually want to help the ogres are absolutely horrible to them, they freed them, and Leorrox was the leader, so Beastmaster Leorrox from Ashes to Outland, and then they all allied together and overthrew the ogres, and Drek'Thar is Leorrox's son, so if it weren't for the Frostwolf clan, Drek'Thar wouldn't be a thing, which I think that's a really cool connection there. And so the leader of the Frostwolves is an orc by the name of Durotan, and his wife's name is Dracca, and they are very key to the story here because Durotan was a really smart guy who was able to sense when, like, he could smell a rat a lot better than most of the other orcish clans could, which is going to come in really handy when Gul'Dan comes along. Before we get into that, does anyone have any clarifying questions?
Not now.
All right,
No,
everyone
but
on board so far? Gotcha.
I'm
Yeah.
excited to hear what's coming next.
I guess I will do a brief aside that if you watch the Warcraft movie, you get a little piece of this, at least in terms of Durotan. It's kind of fun.
Right. Now, the movie does go differently. They do a slightly different version of the story than the official game lore. So it's kind of alternate universe version. Like I said, I love the movie. The movie's what got me into all this in the first place. But yeah, so you can go watch the movie and get a sense of all this. You get a real sense of Durotan's character and stuff. But there will be major differences between that and what I'm going to be telling you here. So just a heads up if that's anyone wants to go see the movie. So, Gul'Dan was the first Orcish warlock. He was an outcast who made a pact with the demons of the Burning Legion that they would give him lots of power and like no one would ever toss him aside again or anything. In exchange, that he would help them enslave the entire Orcish race. He didn't think twice about it. He had no problems. And so, this is essentially, he carried out what I can only compare to a series of political manipulations, in a sense, akin to that of Emperor Palpatine from Star Wars, when he managed to manipulate Anakin into Darth Vader and turn the Republic into an empire. We're talking that level of subterfuge and manipulation in order to corrupt an entire race here. We don't have time to get into all of the steps that he did in order to accomplish that, but one of the key things was that he manipulated the shaman of the Orcish clans, including a very respected one named Nerzoul, who was officially his teacher. He managed to worm his way into the apprenticeship there in order to gain a respected position and pretend that he was a shaman instead of a warlock. And basically what Gul'Dan did was he got the elements to stop responding to the shaman. And that was a huge part of Orcish culture, and so it's a major disaster for them. And also, he managed to convince the orcs which were the other race, they had crash landed in a spaceship years ago and were kind of peacefully cohabiting, but also just keeping to themselves. And that's a whole other story, characters like Prophet Velen and stuff. But basically, things were going along pretty well, a relatively peaceful coexistence. But Gul'Dan managed to manipulate everyone into thinking, okay, the reason that the shamans aren't hearing the elements is because of the Dread-Eye. They want to destroy us, and they did something that stopped all this. And so he managed to manipulate everyone into thinking that they needed to unite all of the different Orcish clans into a single horde under the first war chief, Blackhand, who was the chieftain of a clan called the Leorrox and was just a really nasty guy to put in charge, but he was a good puppet. Gul'Dan would have taken care of himself, but he had a negative charisma score, frankly, and so he wouldn't be. Blackhand was very brutal, but he had a bit more charisma, and so they put him in charge.
That's Rend Blackhand?
Nah, it's Ren's dad. Yeah.
This is just.
Oh, it's his dad.
This guy has no first name. He is only Blackhand. Rend
Blackhand.
and Main Blackhand are his sons.
Okay.
Which gives you a sense of what kind of person he was that he named his kids Rend and Main. I'm just saying.
So you said that Blackhand is from the Blackrock. I'm assuming that they came from a certain mountain.
Close.
Okay.
Blackrock Mountain is actually a mountain in Azeroth that coincidentally has the same name. The Blackrock clan was named for a rare ore that they mourned that they happened to call Blackrock, but coincidentally, aka some of this stuff was made up in the lore late. Way after they came over to Azeroth, some of them ended up coincidentally settling in Blackrock Mountain, like Rend and Main Blackhands ended up doing that. And we're already getting on a tangent here, but so, they are not from Blackrock Mountain. Some of them kind of ended up at Blackrock Mountain through a coincidence, aka just the way that what happens when you are improvising and adding on to elements of a story for 25 years.
Retconning, got it.
Yes, exactly. But basically, the important part for our story here is that, Gul'Dan managed to get, Nerzoul to organize this really big meeting of all the clans here and explain the situation to them, and Durotan was the only one who really smelled that there was something fishy going on here and didn't jump on with it all. He did have to make concessions because he knew that there would be very strong consequences for being the lone voice of dissent. Because remember, they're a small clan. He may be the chief, but in the grand scheme of things, that's not very much power, and he doesn't want all of his people punished for refusing to bend the knee. So he makes some concessions. He allows his clan to join this new horde that's forming, and he even allows Gul'Dan's warlocks to come and start infusing some of his members with this new fell magic that they've discovered. No one really knows what it is. And what it does is it kind of prematurely ages them up and empowers them a bit into stronger warriors so that they can all go and kill the Draenei because, yeah, they're totally the ones who are responsible for all of this. I guarantee you guys, it's not this new foul magic or the sinister green-skinned warlock guy here. No, it's the Draenei who are the problems here, and we need to wipe them all out.
Convenient scapegoat.
Yes, exactly. It was all about the scapegoating. Gul'Dan just goes and causes a ton of problems and blames it all on the Draenei to convince the orcs to go and kill them all. And the night before they launched their really big raid on the Draenei's capital of Shattrath City, Gul'Dan holds a famous ritual that's very key to the story of World of Warcraft, where they decide that this whole just infusing some fell magic into orc warriors isn't enough. We need to fully bind them to the Legion's will, turn them into blood-crazed berserkers who can't even disobey or whatnot. And so by doing that, he gets them to accept drinking demon blood, the blood of the Pit Lord Mannoroth, who we don't have as a regular Hearthstone card yet, but do have as a mercenary now. So at least we get to see him in the game in that way, which I really like. And so by drinking this demon blood, which I'm certain tastes really, really bad.
Looks so tasty.
Looks like an ecto cooler.
It does.
Ecto cooler.
But by doing it, it increases their strength and power. It's like super magic steroids, but also, it corrupts them. It's what turns their skin green. That's why orcs are green, because beforehand they had various different shades of brown and black and gray and all of that. That's another reason the Blackrocks had their name. They were the darker skinned orcs of a black color that happened to match the rock that they dug up. But at any rate, Durotan, this was the one point where he just outright refused. Nerzoul had actually learned what Gul'Dan was up to and been imprisoned and enslaved by him, and was feeling really bad at having helped in the manipulation of all of the orcs. But he managed to smuggle out a message to Durotan because he knew Durotan was the only one who was hesitant about all this stuff. And he said, do not listen to what Gul'Dan says at the meeting tonight. If you do, then your entire clan is doomed forever. And so this is when he refuses the demon blood. He forbids any of the Frostwolves from drinking it. And Gul'Dan is absolutely livid at this point, but he can't risk creating a divide here by killing Durotan because it's the night right before their big battle. He needs everybody focused and united and can't cause a scene, so he lets him live, but there's he wants to find ways to get back at this guy at some point. And then the war against the Draenei happens, and really once they drink the demon blood and are these crazed berserkers who have this constant thirst for violence, they can't really turn it off. And so they just kind of go around destroying everything else on Draenor. Any race that gets in their way, the fell magic ends up turning the entire world into a wasteland. And they are on really hard times right now. Durotan keeps trying to say, we need to stop with this fell magic stuff right here. Look at what it's doing. It's completely destroying our world, destroying our honorable culture, and Blackhand and Gul'Dan are just even more ticked off at him for doing that. And
the problem is that we haven't had enough fell magic.
I don't know if they specifically said that, but I would not be at all surprised. We can go ahead and headcanon that, and there will be no contradictions as far as I'm aware. But it's at this point that we get the famed Dark Portal that Gul'Dan built with the Medivh, the Guardian Medivh, who possessed, of course, by the spirit of Sargeras. and wanted to bring the orcs over to Azeroth in order to conquer it and weaken it for an invasion by the Burning Legion. And so all the orc clans, they just, file in, join the army to go over and conquer the new world. But, well, almost all of them. Some of them are too crazy and savage, and they're left behind until everything is taken care of. And the home world is the orcs. But Durotan, he doesn't want to do this, but he's like, our world is dying. We have literally no choice. Sure, we're going to go ahead and join you. He also has just recently learned that Dracca is pregnant, and so that gives that big sense that, okay, I'm going to have a kid here. I don't want my kid growing up in this dying world. And so, yeah, once again, he doesn't want to capitulate to the demands of the Horde, but he doesn't really feel that he has much of a choice, and so the Frostwolves join. However, shortly after they cross over, Gul'Dan kind of pulls him aside and says, hey, so you are exiled now. I want nothing to do with you. You will never have contact with another orc, another member of the Horde again. You are out of here, or I will kill you all. Again, it's kind of he would have just killed him, but, he didn't want to create a scene and cause questioning in his leadership, and so he's given the opportunity, and again with the motivation that I've got a pregnant wife and a baby on the way, Durotan is okay, we'll opt for the exile here. And that is why they end up settling in a place so far away from any of the other orcs in the Horde, which is going to bring us up to Alterac here. But again, let's take another pit stop and clarifying questions that we need to catch up at this point. Nope, everyone's good?
A lot of questions, but I think we go down a giant rabbit hole. Maybe for another day, we talked about it before and I'd love to talk about it again, but just Medivh in general and, the whole history there and his possession and the Dark Portal and all this stuff. But we're
going to have a whole episode about Medivh at some point.
Absolutely.
He was very key with the story and kind of complex, really.
Yeah.
That would be amazing. I would love that.
Check out future lore episodes for more information.
Yes. So, it's at this point that we're going to get to one of our key legendary cards of the set, Drek'Thar, because this is where he really has his shining moment. Drek'Thar was the head shaman for the Frostwolf clan, very old, very respected, had a strong connection with the elements. But like many shaman, when the elements stopped working, he'd gone along with Gul'Dan and accepted this new fell power because, well, what choice do we have? This is the new cool thing, and the old stuff isn't available anymore, so we're going to go with this. But as it turned out, not only did Draenor have elemental spirits, but Azeroth had its own elemental spirits, which, of course, we already know. How many times has Ragnaros been made into a card?
Not enough. That's the answer.
Just 20 more times, please.
But so it was at this point, during the period of exile, that Drek'Thar heard, he could sense elemental spirits again, that he couldn't for so long. And I want to emphasize here that Drek'Thar is one of the oldest orcs in the story, period, because he's already old and all this stuff goes on. And so far, he has survived up through the current story. Eventually gets to the point where he is such, the rare old elderly orc, which most of them die in combat, so this is really rare, that the orcs basically invents wheelchairs just for him. He's pushed around by his apprentice shaman in a wheelchair, not at this point, but later on in, past all the Alterac stuff, really. But, yeah, this is... I can't imagine what it would be like if we had wheelchair Drek'Thar as a card or something.
That'd be hilarious. I saw it when I was pulling up the artwork for this, and I was like, what? Because, the artwork here, he looks all buff and huge and ferocious, and then, there's some artwork of him, and he's this old dude in a wheelchair, and it's so funny.
Well, in this, what we're seeing him right now with the card, he's maybe more in, I don't know, let's say 60s or 70s. The wheelchair, he's in his 90s or 100s or something. I'd have to double check what his exact ages are at these points, but there's a lot of time that passes between this badass depiction that we have of him and I have to be pushed around in a wheelchair and everyone thinks I'm senile.
desperately want to look like Drek'Thar whenever I'm in my 60s or 70s. Life goals.
It was Nate in that picture with the wheelchair. Was there a flame waker and a sorcerer's apprentice pushing the wheelchair?
I can Photoshop it.
That would be fun. Do it sometime if you have the free time. I want to see that.
That's great.
But yeah, so at any rate, it was at this point, upon hearing and reconnecting with the elemental spirits of Azeroth, that Drek'Thar kind of had, you might say, like a big dramatic conversion, epiphany moment, where he immediately gave up all the fell magic and returned to the elements and the shamanism. And he asked the elements, okay, we've all been exiled here. Can you show us a place to live? And he essentially became kind of like Orc Moses, where he gets a divine apparition that is leading him to lead his clan to a sort of promised land of sorts, a place where they can go and live. And that place is Alterac Valley. It's a very snowy place. It's coincidentally, quite like the area that the Frostwolves originally came from, so they feel pretty at home, even though, again, it's not the easiest to survive here, but it's what they're accustomed to. And more importantly, it's a place where they can hide. Because not only do they have to make sure that they stay away from people like Gul'Dan and other corrupt leadership members of the Horde here, but they have to stay away from every native of Azeroth as well, because it's not like the humans are going to see them and be like, oh, that's the clan that's not participating quite so much in the war that's trying to completely destroy us, so we'll leave them alone. No, they'd see there's orcs. Humans barely know what orcs are at this point. They would attack them. But the elemental spirits managed to help them, guide them to avoid any encounters with the humans. And so they managed to get to Alterac Valley very safe and sound and just kind of start settling in. And it's pretty abandoned at this point. Dwarves aren't part of the story yet. The orcs kind of get to this area first. And it's at this point here, after settling in Alterac, that Durotan and Dracca finally have their baby. And it's a very sweet moment until they realize that, the baby's skin is green, and this fell curse has cursed us all for infinite generations. We have to figure out how to get the fel out of the orcs if we're going to want our son and all of our future descendants to be safe. So they, Durotan and Dracca, take little baby, who they name Goel, and they leave the Frostwolves in Alterac Valley under the care of Drek'Thar to serve as their leader while they're gone, and go to make contact secretly with an old friend named Ogrim Doomhammer, who is the wielder of the Doomhammer, which is, that epic weapon that's been around in the game forever. And so that's where that gets its name, because it was wielded by a guy named Ogrim Doomhammer. Or you could argue that he got his name from wielding the weapon. It's not really quite sure whether the chicken or the egg came first here, honestly.
I will name my weapon Sheep City.
What kind of weapon would that be?
Shears.
It's a band hammer.
I love it. Someone get on fan art of that, please. So, at any rate, for some reason, they didn't leave their baby back in the care of the rest of the clan. They decide, okay, let's take our little infant son on this secret journey that we're completely risking our lives here to attempt to cure our entire race of evil men. They just bring him along, and that turns out to kind of be a mistake, because while Ogrim Doomhammer is very much on their side and wants to try to figure stuff out in order to purge the fel from the Orcish race and get Gul'Dan and Blackhand out of power because they are just the worst, then he entrusts their safety, Durotan and Dracca and Goel's safety, to some bodyguards of his to, okay, they're going to escort you back to Alterac Valley and going to keep you safe. Turns out those bodyguards were actually secretly loyal to Gul'Dan the whole time, and they absolutely murder Durotan and Dracca. And don't bother finishing off the baby because they'd rather just leave him to freeze. Yeah, really, really bad people. And so they just go, and it just so happens that after they're gone, a human hunting party led by a noble named Elidis Blackmore comes along and finds this strange little orcish baby and decides to pick him up, take him in, not out of a charitable, I'm running an orphanage for orcs here, but because he decides to raise this orc as a gladiator in order to line his own pockets from betting on the gladiatorial matches. And he names him Thrall. And this is Thrall's origin story right here. Thrall is a member of the Frostwolf clan, but growing up, he doesn't know that. He doesn't know what an orc is. He's the only orc that he has really ever seen, aside from the occasional one when he sees them in internment camps, because after all of the wars, the Burning Legion abandoned the orcs, and all of that crazed bloodlust that they had turned to lethargy, and they just didn't have the willpower to do anything, and so it was real easy to round up a bunch of them, just kind of put them in these internment camps. The Alliance didn't know what to do. Should we execute them? Should we keep them alive? That's more humane. And so they're just kind of in these camps for now. And so Thrall grows up in one of these, and he has no knowledge of orcish culture or his heritage or who he is. He just knows himself as the gladiator slave to Blackmore. But eventually, kind of turns out that raising and training this incredibly powerful being, because orcs just, they're by nature far more muscle bound than human, just have a natural, much higher strength stat racially. And it's he's trained that, but he's also educated, with books and everything. But Blackmore also still treats him absolutely horribly. And that's not a good combination. This guy's just an absolute idiot that you are raising the perfect weapon and doing all that you can to make sure that he grows up to hate you. Naturally, Thrall escapes, he rebels, and he wants to get away from this guy.
Okay, perfect plan. Make the perfect weapon. Turn it against me. What could go wrong?
Yes, exactly. This guy is a complete moron, honestly, and a lot of other nobles in the human kingdoms know it, and he's just one of those people who has a position and there's not much that you can do about it because he has money and power, but nobody likes him at all.
So he's earned his reputation.
Yeah, pretty much. And so it's at this point, Thrall is, he just escapes, and by coincidence, he happens to run into the Warsong clan, who managed to not get put in internment camps, are just kind of roaming around. They happen to be run by Grommash Helsk, who is, of course, our original warrior legendary. And Grommash instructs Thrall in, the first lessons of what it means to be an orc. But then he tells him, hey, so there's these Frostwolf clan that's up in the Alterac Mountains here. You really want to learn who you are, go and see them. And that's exactly what Thrall does. He goes up, he makes the journey, and that's where he discovers that, turns out that this clan is his birthright, honestly, that he is the son of the former chieftain, and he becomes a student of Drek'Thar in learning the ways of shamanism. So the reason that Thrall is such a powerful shaman is because Drek'Thar was his teacher. And if you played through the Book of Heroes, Thrall's story, I think it's the second challenge where it's Drek'Thar is teaching you lessons and mastering the elements and stuff. That's what that is representing at this point in the story.
Oh, that's really cool.
Cool. Because it's in Alterac Valley.
That's great. Yeah, I need to go replay it now. That's awesome.
Yeah, and so essentially, this is where Thrall stays for a while, and this is also where we get our Frostwolf Thrall skin and the Alterac Thrall skin that we have up on the screen right here, which, of course, the Frostwolf Thrall was originally from the one you could buy with the Book of Heroes. And I'm sure that they've been making those available randomly to purchase for gold at some point, so I'm sure it'll come around again. And of course, Alterac Thrall was part of the very first rewards track that came with the Darkmoon Fair. And so, yeah, that's where those fit in with the story in Thrall's journey right there. But eventually, he decides that he needs to go and free the orcs from being in a tournament camp. He's going to forge a new horde, but one that's free of all this fell magic that corrupted his race. And this is essentially all the events that Thrall and the orcs go through in the game of Warcraft 3. We're not going to go through all the details here because, one, that would take too long. Two, it's really more of a Thrall story thing because the Frostwolves just pretty much stay put, honestly. Even after Thrall manages to unite the Orcish clans, along with a few other races like the Trolls and the Tauron, and forms the new horde, builds the city of Orgrimmar as the capital city and all of that, the Frostwolves are just kind of like, you know, we've really developed an attachment to Alterac Valley here, so, like, we'll be your allies and stuff. Call on us if you need any help, but, we think we're just going to stay put right here in this snowy, inhospitable place that we just took a real liking to. And
So what I'm hearing you say is that the Frostwolves are standing ready.
Kind of. Yeah, I suppose you could say that. But it's also just that they want to live there, which I don't entirely understand because it's not like it's their ancestral home. They've been there for maybe 2-3 generations at the most, but they still feel like, yeah, this is where we're supposed to be. Probably the elemental spirits told us we're supposed to live here is a huge motivation for them to just want to stay put there. But that's essentially what the Frostwolves are doing there. And anyone have anything before we move on to the dwarves?
No, I don't think so.
All right. So, switching gears a bit here, the dwarves have not as much of a large backstory as to why they're there, as I mentioned at the start, but we do have a bit of backstory just to explain some things. So, much like the Frostwolves, we have seen the word Stormpike here from the very beginning of Hearthstone. And once again, in case you're wondering, what the heck is a Stormpike? Just know, I've got a huge gun! And it's like, is that just like what dwarves do? Or what? Like, no, this is a very specific regiment of a specific clan of dwarves that are here in the snowy Alterac Mountains here. And so, once again, just like Frostwolf Grunt, Frostwolf Warlord, you finally get to learn what the heck is a Stormpike. And so, much like pretty much all dwarves, they have their headquarters, they're one of the many clans who lives in the capital city of Ironforge. They're a more minor clan. The three major clans are the Bronzebeard dwarves, who run Ironforge, the Wildhammers, who live out in some other areas. They're kind of like the very Scottish shaman dwarves who ride around on griffins and throw lightning with their hammers and stuff. And so you might remember some of those types of thematic cards from the Descent of Dragons set. So that those were some Wildhammer dwarves there. Then, of course, there's the Dark Iron dwarves who end up living in Blackrock Mountain. But those are like the three major clans. But the Stormpikes are a more minor clan who coexist in areas like Ironforge. And here, one key thing about Dwarven culture is that they are really into archaeology. They're the race that founded the League of Explorers, which is based in Ironforge. So that's
cool.
where those come in. It eventually grew to expand to other races, of course, but it's primarily dwarves who make up the leadership and are the big enthusiasts of it, because they are actually descended from stone beings called earthen that were created by the Titans, but they lost their heritage. And so when they started to rediscover it and learn that there might be a connection between the origin of their race and the Titans, they wanted to learn more. And so they are just obsessed not only with the typical dwarves, mining and everything, because of course they mine, they craft, typical fantasy dwarven activities, but they also want to find lots of relics that will help them to understand where they came from. And it just so happens that Alterac Valley is a place where they think some of those relics might be. It's also a very resource-rich area, lots of iron, maybe some other good metals there, maybe some stone that they can use, but especially the relics. And so King Magni Bronzebeard sends out the Stormpike clan with an imperial decree to go and claim that area as an extension for the Dwarven clans, just like Ironforge is. You can see from looking at Ironforge that this is a climate the dwarves are very accustomed to living into as well. They like the snowy mountain areas quite a bit themselves. And so that is the main reason that the Stormpike are there. They're there to try to have some archaeological aspects, to recover resources, and to expand into territory that they think is just a natural, rightful extension of the area that they already call home. There's not that much more information that we have. Obviously, Vanndar is the leader of the Stormpikes. He is like the clan chieftain there and the leader of the militia aspect that they have here. The main other fact that we know about the Stormpikes is that they have a particular bond, much like the Frostwolves have a bond with wolves. The Stormpikes, particularly, like all dwarves have the racial mount is the ram, but the Stormpikes have a particular bond with theirs. In fact, one of the few little extra lore bits that we know is that they carve their identification into the horn of all the rams that they raise. And these rams are like very sturdy beasts, like very hardy. They make great mounts for mountainous and snowy terrain. And of course, if you're riding on them, it's really great where you can headbutt your enemies. Like if you remember Balf Ramshield from the Grand Tournament, he's a Hearthstone original character, but he represents quite a bit of that, a dwarf charging in on a ram as their racial mount there. And
Cool.
yeah, that's one of the main things. Dwarves are also a bit more of an engineering type of race. Not quite to the extent as gnomes. Gnomes are the really crazy, I can just invent sci-fi gadgets out of thin air with a can opener and a tinfoil hat. And presto, I have invented helicopters. But literally, gnomes invented airplanes and helicopters and a bunch of stuff. Yes. But unlike gnomes, the dwarves are not to that extent, but they do have a particular affinity with firearms compared to most of the other races. It's like their boomsticks and blasting powder and all that type of stuff that you use to put a fantasy spin on guns. And so that's why, they have the Stormpike cards are often they have, I've got a huge gun, because that's kind of one of their specialties as a race and as a detachment in this particular area. So, again, not as much to cover with the Frostwolves, but that's essentially what we know about the Stormpikes. And believe me, the articles that I've write about these are very unevenly balanced. One of them is super long. The other is I'm coming up with stuff to write here.
Yeah. So I know that the dwarves were going into Alterac Valley to kind of look for the resources and the things that belong in museums. But how close to Ironforge is Alterac Valley? Kind of were they exploring that way? Is it close, or was it kind of a bit of a trek?
I have to take a quick look at the map in order to refresh myself on that. Let's see.
Oh my gosh. I'm not stumped him, but he had to look at something. I'm so proud.
Let's see.
Goliath is he's a library of information on WoW. He seems to always have everything, but you can't know. You can't know it all.
That's how I know it was a good question, right?
The finer points of some of the geography is a bit more of one of my weak spots. I will be perfectly honest on that point. Not that I don't know it at all. I know a lot of the general stuff, but I don't have I know the stories very well.
Yeah.
The maps memorized are not quite so much.
For sure.
There you go. Check the group chat.
Yeah. Well, that's a map of Alterac Valley itself right there, yeah. So that gives you a sense of, so you see we got the Alliance stuff at the top, we got the Horde base at the bottom, and that's going to come into play a bit more when we're talking about the way that the battleground itself works. But in terms of how close this would be to Ironforge itself, let's see, I've almost got something pulled up here. It's relatively close. I wouldn't say that they're next door neighbors, but it makes sense that the dwarves would want to naturally expand into that area, honestly. Yeah, so there's a bit of distance here. I found a map, putting that in group chat right now. That'll give a sense if you want to put that up for everybody to see. So you can see that we have Ironforge listed out in a bit more of a slightly southern region, just a bit north of Stormwind. It's this purple area. But we have like a bit of crossing a bay in order to get over to the Alterac area. So like I said, it's not next door neighbors, but pretty reasonable sense that, hey, this area is very much like our home, and there's relics here, and yeah, as far as they know when they get there, they don't think anyone lives there. They don't know about the Frostwolves. The Frostwolves have been hiding from everybody. Mm-hmm. So yeah, they're like, yeah, sure, why not go over here? And then we get to the conflict, because both of them think that the land is rightfully theirs for various reasons. In my opinion, both of those claims are questionable at best, because Frostwolves literally just kind of settled down there looking for a place to hide. It's not like, this has been my family home for 1,000 generations. And like, no, they just, they moved there after participating in an invasion of the planet, I might add. So
not even your planet.
So I would say that throws their claim a bit into question. And for the Stormpikes, just like, they're there in order to expand some territory that's not even next door and just claim some resources. So really, I'd say that both of them have about equal rights, because neither of them have very much of a strong claim, in my personal opinion. Just looking at their logic for that. However, that doesn't stop them from constantly duking it out over many, many years. Like canonically, like the battle for Alterac is constantly going on as a proxy war between the Alliance and the Horde in some fashion, which is kind of an explanation for why you can always queue into the battleground, no matter what expansion it is in World of Warcraft. Brand Bronzebeard theorized that the part of the initial dispute might have been a misunderstanding religiously, that because the orcs, with their shamanistic culture, very strongly venerate the spirits of their departed ancestors, so any graveyards they would have that the Stormpikes accidentally desecrated without knowing it, that infuriates the Frostwolves. Like, how dare you disturb the resting place of our dead spirits, and we will destroy you for that. And the Stormpikes are like, we're here to learn about our ancestors. What are you talking about? And just constant misunderstandings, everyone refusing to yield, and all of them bringing in allies from the Alliance and the Horde in order to hold the ground in a battle that never really gains ground. It pushes, it pulls, but really it's a never-ending battle with no canonical winner. And that's the backstory to what's going on here. We got the Frostwolves, who are there because Orc Moses led them there. We have the Stormpikes, who are there because they want to learn about their connection with the Titans and get some resources and maybe expand their home a bit. And these guys just can't get along. And
right.
Like, only one of us can live here. We are not being neighbors. We are not being flatmates. So someone has to leave. Someone has to die. And we're bringing in all our friends.
There you go.
And we'll get into the specifics of who those friends are and how the fight works out in part 2.
Absolutely. But one thing I think we did want to touch on, right, is how this interacts with our new characters, our mercenaries, right?
Right. So, as though the astute and that's not a word.
Observer.
Yes, the astute observer might have noticed is that Rokara, our Orc Warrior mercenary representative, is from the Frostwolf clan. They really emphasize it. Every time you play her in mercenary, she's Frostwolves! And like, it's her battle cry, and it's like literally her first lines when you play the book at Mary. She's like, I am from the Frostwolf clan. We are proud orcs. Our chief Thrall is a Frostwolf. In their just not at all clunky writing that they do for these solo adventures.
It's not subtle at all.
Right. And so she's a representative from that clan, and obviously takes a lot of pride in her clan, as those are her people. And then on the other side, we have Tavish Stormpike, who, you know, is a member of the Stormpike clan. And now, the Stormpikes are, one thing I forgot to mention, they're a relatively almost aristocratic, kind of a wealthy, well-off clan. As Tavish mentions, that's only one side of the family. He's out being a mercenary because, like, you know, he has to make his own loot. He's not from the side of the family that has money. So these are Hearthstone original characters, but now you can see this is where they're coming from. This is how they are going to be bringing the year-long Year of the Griffin story into Alterac Valley. Obviously, we had the thing in the Book of Mercenary Stories where, like, it's about the chasing the Naru shards, and one of them is in Alterac Valley, so they're all going there. But I'm pretty sure the story is definitely going to lean into how Rokara and her Horde allies are going to want to fight to support her people. Tavish and his alliance allies are going to want to fight to support his people, and that's what's going to bring us into where each of them are joining in this battleground, this faction war right here. And I just really like how they managed to tie all that in together. It's one of the more clever things they've done with the story, in my opinion, just seeding that in right from the start.
Absolutely. I love hearing the story, and it's so neat to hear the Warcraft lore kind of adapted to the kind of, you know, newly created Hearthstone original characters, but how they still tie in together. And it just amazes me that you can play the game and totally miss out on all of the story behind it. And you're just like, cool, I got these cool characters, you know, whatever. They do these neat things, but there's this so much depth there. I absolutely love it. So yeah, thank you for sharing the story with us. It's so great.
My pleasure. That's what I absolutely love about Hearthstone. It's why I get all excited when it's reveal season. One of my favorite times. You know, I get 3 times a year, and well, okay, maybe technically 6 now that we have mini sets, but it's not the same. And you're like, oh, you know what? When I see this character got made to a card, I'm like, yes, because especially when they make it so that the card's effects reflect what they do in the story, which I'll say Drek'Thar and Vanndars don't really. Those are just card mechanics right there. There's nothing particular about Vanndar, who, if he is the smallest person around, he makes everybody more powerful. Or Drek'Thar, if he's the biggest around, he will pull people out. It's like that's not a story thing. That's a mechanic thing. But some cards do that, and I get really excited when they manage to match with the story. And it makes a lot more sense once you know the story to understand why the heck did they give the card this effect.
Yeah, absolutely.